any questions about what any of this stuff means, like clarification between diction and syntax, or any of that kind of stuff before we start moving on a little bit? We're okay. So yesterday we were coming up with attitudes prior to this. I think we were looking at like the hopefulness, frustration, anger, resentment, all that kind of stuff. Then locating devices we're not locating them yet, but at least coming up with what the possible devices certainly would be. So diction, the word choice, senses. Remember, details, facts, doesn't mean it has to be numbers, but certainly just facts themselves that would be there. And then figurative language, we highlighted this because you're not going to use figurative language as itself as a rhetorical device, but you can pick specific ones that, all right, I'm going to do a paragraph with motif, I'm going to do a paragraph with symbolism, but you would not have all of those things combined into one paragraph because that's just going to be a little too crazy for us. Syntax, sentence structure, which could be forms of repetition. It could be things like parallel structure as well. It doesn't have to be just repetition of words. It could be repetition of sentence structure, and then punctuation, reference to where we said, it could be punctuation that's getting used, or, Chapter 5 has it, where it's punctuation that's even not getting used. And Chapter 7 has a lot of that, where you hardly have any punctuation taking place. That's that used car salesman chapter. Any ideas why you would do something like that, where you purposely ignore punctuation, like quotation marks and things like that?
Maybe Steinbeck was showing that this wasn't necessarily like a one-time thing. This was happening like across the West because of the Dust Bowl.
Okay, so let's see where I'm at. There we go. There used to be a thing that would say extend page, and I would hit it, and it would extend the page.
Where'd it go?
They took it away, but I can still extend the page.
That's so weird.
But I have to hit it in the right spot. So if I do like this, probably trying to extend the page a little bit. All right, so with the quotation marks being used or not being used, so when you use quotation marks, you're identifying dialogue. Like Kobe said, quote, blah, 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 blah. Your point being with them maybe not being used is it's more of like a universal
Yes, because like
thought, statement, idea.
with the narrative, you don't really see them not use quotation marks with the Joe family. So I think maybe for general public and for expository, Steinbeck, you did not use quotation marks. Just basically like this could happen to anyone, really.
And he does use them at times, and certainly in the Joe chapters, in those narrative chapters, he does use them all the time. I can't think of a narrative where he doesn't use them. But yeah, in the expository, it kind of comes and goes. And you think about it, like how, still related to your idea, how would the book be different, other than shorter, if the expository chapters were not there? Because Ashley could read chapters 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and then whatever the rest of the numbers be, all about the Jodes, and the book is still going to make sense. Hey, what happened? She could still tell you all about that stuff. But besides condensing it, or making it longer, I guess would be the right way, why add that stuff in there? Look at multiple ideas, Byron.
Well, it's not really about the Jodes, it's about the migrant people in general, and so he just chooses the family that he's writing about.
Okay.
So you just miss the big picture if you just use Jodes.
So the expository chapters help emphasize that this isn't an isolated incident or bunch of instances for this one family, but more of that cultural thing could be taking place. Okay.
I think
That must have been a common thought because we're all handling.
I think that Steinbeck uses most of the more radical ideas of social commentary in the expository chapter, so that's kind of like where his playing ground is.
Okay.
Expressing them, while narrative just focused on the narrative.
So expository adds to what Byron was saying, more of the universal approach, that this isn't just a one-time thing, and then you threw in like social commentary. think radical is the word that you use, like
Yeah.
opportunity for more of that radical stuff to take place. Annalise, I got to say it. I got to.
Yeah. It also shows like the state of like the economy and stuff of the United States during that time. Because one of the questions that you had on the sheet was like, how did the events like in the economy affect the like plot of the book? And it kind of shows that.
You're talking about a question on the summer reading handout,
Yeah.
not a question on the quiz where Justin's going, I didn't see that question. I missed that one. Allie?
I think like the chapters with the Joes show one, like I guess it's like everyone's experiencing the same thing, but the expository chapters show like different situations as well. Like it's not the exact thing that happened to the Joes, it shows like other scenarios.
So they tend to be similar, you know, because after the used car salesman, then the Jodes end up, you know, about the car that they have, and in the chapter 9, you're leaving the possessions behind. Then they have to decide which ones they're going to leave behind it and take with them. So there's certainly the similarities, but yeah, it's not all the same for the one person. Take a look. Original question was, why don't we have any quotation marks? And Kobe, I think, was the one who said, because of that universal appeal to it, that it could be beyond just a one idea thing. And now, and when we're talking about expository and narrative, we're really talking about plot structure, which even though it's not a diddle, it still certainly could be a rhetorical concept that you might want to investigate, you know, the use of expository and narrative chapters. But it's certainly reaffirming that universal kind of approach that would be taking place. Haven't talked to Steinbeck and ever. So I don't know why he did not use the quotation marks, but yeah, I would agree that I think it's probably that it's not just that one person, that one idea, but this is more of a cultural concept that would be taking place. And certainly, you know, you take a look at the story, you're dealing with one family, but then you're also dealing with one nation, and you could even kind of argue that you're probably dealing with like a whole humanity kind of idea. One of think the devices that mentioned in there up here for figurative language is illusion, where you're not really changing the meaning of words, but you're still making those historical references. Yeah, in his radical chapters, you know, the I to We chapter that we talked about, he mentions Paine, Marx, Lenin, Jefferson. So you certainly are getting a lot of revolutionaries being referenced in there. And he does a whole swarm of like biblical allusions that would be taking place throughout the course of the story. What's really the family doing? They're leaving. It's like a mass exodus that is taking place. California is the is the promised land for them, overcoming all these plagues and all that kind of stuff that's going along the way. So that certainly kind of adds to that universal approach that it's not just going to be a one thing for the family. But you can see that there are certainly similarities that start to take place as you look at the devices and how they can certainly be used within the course of the story, and then how you'll use them within your essay. The question is, how do I organize all this stuff? Because if you're going to be successful with any kind of composition, what sentence do you absolutely have to nail? You need to have a thesis that is going to work, because that's going to be essentially the backbone for that whole entire essay. So we don't need that. We're going to do a math problem. Spa. You need to relax, go to the spa.
The top eye looks like the Disney.
Yeah,
eye.
I was thinking
I
about that.
am
the
Disney.
handwriting.
Yes.
I am Disney.
You are Disney.
I am Disney.
You're my Kermit.
I am Disney.
You are Kermit.
It's a math problem. SPA, S plus P plus A equals your thesis statement. Now this only works for rhetorical analysis, and the good thing is that's all you're doing for right now, so less chance of getting confused. Question is, what are S, P, and A? Any ideas? They're probably going to be wrong anyway, so I'll just tell you. Strategies, purpose, argument. You have those three things in that order, you have a thesis statement. Okay. However, I think it's in your best interest to work backwards. Figure out the argument, figure out the purpose, figure out the strategies last. So our argument that we have to come up with is, Steinbeck's attitude about the effects of the Dust Bowl on the migrant people. Anyone have a potential? You're not like staking claim to this argument. Anyone have a potential argument that they might write about? Let's do attitude about the effects of the Dust Bowl on the migrant people.
Despair.
About? Like, what despair in the sense of the migrants are feeling despair, Steinbeck feels despair? Okay. We're going to have to get a little bit more specific. We'll work on it.
Just general frustration for treatment of the migrants and government system in Ireland.
Okay, so despair with the treatment of the migrant people, all right? Just getting ideas, not saying not good or anything like that.
I was thinking like hopefulness for what would be the results of all the people moving to California and helping build the industry there.
Okay, so would it hopefulness only in the sense of what they think is going to be there, or even after we realize what is and is not there, still hopefulness that it could?
Yeah, like
Work out.
hopefulness that it'll like they still keep going even though they like had so many setbacks, like that kind of hopefulness.
Okay. Justin, of those ideas, which ones do you want to do?
Because yesterday I thought that if I was going to write about the two main that we covered, I thought I could get more specifics from those.
So that there is still, and we're kind of paraphrasing, but hopefulness for humanity to like prevail, kind of along those lines, maybe. Hopefulness that you want to say, Grace, since it was kind of your idea, that like the poor will still prevail, or hopefulness that there's still good in people, or none of the above, and you want.
Well, yeah, I mean I was kind of thinking just like hopefulness that each person if they work hard enough could make a life of themselves.
So hopefulness that each person can succeed. Okay. Purpose, and this is where people go, well, what is the purpose? The purpose is the verb of your sentence. I think as we do more purposes, you'll have better ideas as to what potential verbs would be. Anyone remember what verb it will not be? Number 33, show. Not going to be that one. Strategies. Strategies are going back to the rhetorical strategies, the rhetorical devices over here. Again, this is simply potential. So you're not saying, yes, I will use these. What are some rhetorical devices that you could see yourself using? And in theory, dealing with the hopefulness that each person can succeed. Imagery.
Details.
Details. Oops. I'm going to include diction as the last one because it tends to be a common one that gets used. However, you can't write simply diction. Why not? What's the problem with arguing how Steinbeck uses diction to prove his points? Because what's the okay? And you talk about like the way a word is stated, and it's pretty well going to be understood, at least between you and me, student and teacher, that we're not going to be talking about the way that a person enunciates. But what's our other definition or other meaning of diction? It literally means word choice, okay? So Steinbeck uses words to get his point across. Yeah, no kidding. I knew that. All writers use words to get their points across. But what part of speech could you put in front of the word diction that would specify it? You can put an adjective. So if there are, what are certain types of words that he uses would be something that you could use. Now, Grace, this example is not going to work with this hopefulness idea. A lot of times people make reference to like the derogatory diction or the demeaning diction, you know, OP, scum, animalistic, dehumanizing diction, things like that. I don't think you're going to talk about derogatory diction and then talk about hopefulness that, hey, everything's going to be okay. But it could happen. What, again, not that we have specific words in mind, but what would be like positive adjectives that we could put in front of diction that we would think would kind of tie in with that hopefulness? Uplifting, inspiring. Don't use the word hopeful because that's going to be rather redundant. You know, there's various, we were talking about like revolutionaries or the social commentary, you know, so there might be rebellious diction, you know, that they can succeed, that they can overcome. Variety of ideas that could possibly be out there. What did you say? Inspiring? Or uplifting? Imagery, details, and uplifting diction, hopefulness that each person can succeed. We need a verb. Don't say it.
No, that was my thinking.
Yeah. What would be a verb that could link those two parts together? That's like show junior. Worst case scenario, you could always go back to the wording of the prompt.
Ooh.
And so that's the enlightenment noise that you make. So what verb does get used? You know, you could do convey. What I would probably add would be Steinbeck's hopefulness, because now I'm making sure I'm mentioning the author and his attitude. But what would be other options besides convey? Which, I mean, you read it. Imagery, details, and uplifting diction convey Steinbeck's hopefulness that each person can succeed. It's a complete sentence. I might add, you know, in California after the Dust Bowl or something like that. But what other things would work? And you could say something, you know, like advance, argue. What would be if after you've read the book, you go, hey, there's some hopefulness in here, a lot of readers would go, are you serious? No, I am. Like, what would be a word that would be a little bit more assertive? Yes, it's in there. Confirm. Prove. No, whatever word, reveal, I don't know if expose necessarily in this case would I guess be the best. Depending on, you know, if you were doing one about like the horrors of capitalism or the economic system, that could be an exposed one, you know, in that kind of sense. But yeah, confirm would be good. So now, imagery, details, and uplifting diction confirms Steinbeck's hopefulness that each person can succeed. It's a sentence. It's a thesis. Done. Now, since we had the word imply before, I'll steal that one. What is implied that my first paragraph is going to be built around? Or upon, I guess.
Imagery.
My first paragraph, body paragraph, is going to be all about imagery. So my examples of imagery have to do what? Not just imply, confirm the hopefulness. So, there's chapter 23 where the fruit is put on fire because no one is going to be allowed to eat. We're not going to let any of the people have the fruit that is basically going to go to waste. That's strong imagery. That really doesn't confirm hopefulness as the fruit is being ruined. So you can't just go imagery, I'm going to use those. You need examples of imagery that confirm the hopefulness that each person can succeed. So this is why you don't want to start with the strategies, because you can't go, hey, I know these devices are there. You need to make sure those devices match up with the argument. So figure out your argument. I'd say purpose and argument together. What are now my contextual examples that I'm going to use, and then what are the devices that are present that would work? But this is telling me imagery is going to be my first paragraph, details is going to be my second, uplifting diction is going to be my third, and that's the order that I would be working in. So I get 3 examples of the imagery, 3 examples of detail, 3 examples of diction, how it confirms, that's his point. So in that regard, you at least know what you're doing for each paragraph. Doesn't mean it's easy to put the paragraphs together and structure them yet, but you at least know what it is you're supposed to do. So the hope is that statement, the SPA, would make at least this a little bit easier to figure out how am I going to follow through with it. And keep in mind, just because this one says hopefulness doesn't mean that you have to certainly go with that route. Byron, you said despair. I guess it would be like what aspects of the experience maybe upset Steinbeck the most. That would be a way to kind of specify it a little bit more, just so it can fit into that sentence form.
This out how despair doesn't exactly fit.
Right. And as we do this more and more, you kind of start to figure out, okay, how do I want to do the wording? But there's certainly that idea of desperate, despair, the world's coming to an end is certainly present within the book that can be proven quite a bit. So going into the weekend, do people at least have an idea as to how this would be set up?
Yes.
Your second prompt, which I don't want to really talk about, but keep in mind your second prompt is also rhetorical analysis, so it would still be diddles and spa. You would still go through the same process to complete it. So this part is still kind of new. Once you get one essay under your belt, one rough draft under your belt, I think the second one might come along a little bit easier because you already have kind of a thought process. On Monday, we're going to look specifically at Chapter 5. We're going to make a spa and diddles for Chapter 5, as if you were writing an essay only on Chapter 5. So we'll have specific details, examples coming from there, kind of again mimicking the way you would set it up. Wednesday, we're going to do this kind of stuff with Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream speech, so that you are getting more and more practice leading into your rough drafts before you actually have to do it for final copy. That'll be September 14th, I think I said. So it's just kind of getting that practice, those steps. But not everything we do is rhetorical analysis. When you take your AP exam, you have 3 essay questions that you have to answer in the 2 hours. I think you can figure out what one of those essay questions is. It's rhetorical analysis. You get a passage and you have to analyze it. So the skills that you're doing here these first few weeks, we use them all year, but it does manifest itself in that. Have a good weekend.
Do you want to?
If you're going to eat a problem, I will let you eat along with